So did you guys receive my email about this event with Kevin Taweel? So look, if you're able to make it, honestly, even if you have to stay up past your bedtime one night, I would do it because it's an amazing opportunity. I mean, Kevin is one of the most interesting and nice people that I've gotten to know over the past. Him and I have gotten to know each other over the past 5 or 6 years. He's extremely interesting, but he's also like a Silicon Valley legend. As in, you talk to any VC that knows their shit, or you talk to any tech executive, they will tell you how much they respect Kevin. Kevin is kind of viewed as one of the real leaders in Silicon Valley. His company is not well known, but that's intentional. They're a private company, even though they make $6 billion in revenue a year. He started it from zero, and they're extremely profitable. So, and it's going to be an interesting event. We're trying something a little bit different, where it's going to be more interactive. We're going to send you a case for, like, everything is free. I mean, you basically get a Stanford MBA lecture for free from like one of the most popular lecturers there, that being Kevin, obviously. So to me, it's kind of exciting. I'm excited to, anyway, read if you haven't read it, but you have to send me an email if you want to do it, because I'm not going to send the link to everybody. Right. So, but I do want it to have once we reach, probably my maximum capacity is going to be about, it's probably going to be something to the order. It's going to be between 30 and 40 people, but I'd like to get to my capacity because I want him to feel like there was a lot of enthusiasm around it. Anyway, so if you guys can make it, I would recommend it. Yeah.
I will be there.
Yeah, just but you have to send me the email, because if I don't receive the email, you don't get into the spreadsheet. So any other questions? No? Okay, we just want to get started? Okay, so, all right, well, I guess good afternoon to all of you guys. I don't even know what I call what I'm at right now. So look, today we are going to get started with a new topic in the course, right? So if we just want to kind of at a very high level recap what we did in our first topic of the course, topic one. Topic one was really focused on basic valuation techniques, right? So the basic valuation techniques being DCF and comps-based valuation. And our real focus in discussing that topic was to focus on implementation, right? How do you do it in the real world? What are all the judgment calls you need to make? What sort of data do you look for? Having a sense of realism on how accurate that exercise is, with hopefully everyone agreeing that the answer to that is it's useful, but not super accurate, because you need to make so many judgment calls, and it's impossible. Anyone who tells you that they can do it perfectly, hopefully you now realize, is probably not someone to trust, either because they're incompetent or because they're lying, right? So like having that sense of appreciation of like, this is how you do basic valuation problems in the real world. This is the process that you want to go through to be able to actually execute on that in as good of a manner as you can. That was our goal in topic one. Topic two, our goal is going to be different. With topic two, our goal is going to be to extend the basic valuation toolkit and to try to kind of enlarge the set of things that we are, look, at the end of the day, let me be honest, theoretically capable of considering. What do I mean by that? We are not going to be focused on implementation in this topic. So, I've talked a lot about Planet Earth versus Planet McGill, and I have to be honest, topic two is going to be a little bit more like Planet McGill, a little bit less like Planet Earth, because I want to get the ball rolling for you guys to understand how to extend this value, like our basic valuation techniques, but we do not have the time in a course like this. I mean, even in normal times, we wouldn't have the time to really go from zero to Planet McGill to Planet Earth. It's not possible. So we don't try to do that. But I think because it is important for you guys to have an appreciation for how our valuation techniques can be improved, right? Because we did establish there are problems, there are imperfections in topic one. And I want you guys to have that mindset of, if there's a problem, it's worthwhile to think about how it can be improved, right? And I think just touching it theoretically is able to get you guys moving in that direction, right? So you want to think about it as like, you know, it's kind of like, I have 2 kids. One is 4, one is 13. The 13-year-old doesn't want to talk to me anymore, but the 4-year-old still is willing to hang a little bit. And I remember, you know, when he wasn't able to bike yet, right? Look, what did I do first? I would like, you know, hold him on the bike and kind of gently push a little bit, right? Like, I had to do that for him to be eventually able to ride the bike by himself. If I just said, start riding the bike, I give you 2 weeks, it would probably, I would probably have real problems with, like, you know, I don't even know the name of the divisions in the government, but the ones that, you know, have the power to tell you you're being a bad parent. So, right, you don't do that. Well, you know, same thing, right? Just like I'd be a bad parent if I basically tried to push you guys down the hill with no training wheels right away. I'd be a bad teacher if I didn't, you know, do those intermediate steps. So that's the goal here. The intermediate step is to get you guys onto Planet McGill for extension. And my hope is, you know, you guys have, if you ever have an interest in the future to pursue that more deeply, that you know, explore how you could do that, you know, either by studying some more or by self-studying. A lot of these things I've learned on my own instead of being taught, right? But hopefully it builds you to that mindset, right? That by, you know, doing the, you know, slight hill on a bike with training wheels, that you're like, oh, wow, you know, I could go from this to like riding in the Tour de France, right? Right. So, you know, it's more like that, right? It's kind of one of these things where if you really want to like take the most advantage of what we do in topic 2, you'll have to do more outside of ACF. By the way, there is another alternative is, you know, like what would be like another analogy with my son is like, you know, like there are cars, right? He's not legally allowed to drive a Tesla yet, right? But he has a little toy car, right? Well, sometimes, you know, you give the kid the toy car, and they're like, oh, it's pretty cool. I wish I could, I wish I could, you know, drive in a Tesla. And like, instead of learning to drive a Tesla, you just, you know, pay someone to drive you in a Tesla, right? We may be able to do this with Tesla once they go into full self-driving mode eventually, right? They'll be the Uber Tesla thingy, right? Why am I saying this? Another way that you can take advantage of the tools that we're going to discuss in topic 2 is that from these tools you realize, oh, it is possible to do a better job valuing than just using the topic 1 basic tools. I am not an expert in it, but now that I know that it's possible, I will find an expert and hire them in a consulting contract or as someone that's going to do, you know, specifically valuation stuff within my organization. I can hire the expert who does know that stuff to do it for me, right? That's always an option too, right? The moment you know the basics, you're in a much better position to hire the people who can do that well, as opposed to the people who just say that they can do it well. That's a big deal in the business world, right? There's a lot of like bad consultants, for instance, right? Who know all the buzzwords, but really when you scratch under the surface, they don't know shit, right? You don't want to hire people like that. You want to know enough so that you can separate the legitimate providers of advice, right? Versus the the fly-by-night snake oil salespeople, right? So that's another use case of what we learn in this topic, is it just gives you enough appreciation of what's possible and enough appreciation of the basics that you can test the person you're thinking of hiring on those basics. And if they don't answer those questions well, you do not hire them, right? So to me, those are the two sources of practical value in topic 2, which again is, it is different from the sources of practical value from topic 1. Topic 1, my goal was really to allow you guys to get closer to being DIY. You can do it yourself. And here it's like getting closer to being smart about hiring the right, worker, which, matters a lot, because in the real world, you don't want to do everything yourself. If you do DIY in everything, you're going to limit your ability to leverage your talent, right? The most talented people in the business world are very good at deciding, what do I DIY and what do I pass on to people, and how do I hire the right people that I will pass that on to. This is like almost like the most fundamental, two fundamentally most important decisions that you make as a business person. In fact, I'm pretty sure if you talk to any, amazing leader, what you will notice is that they're really good at answering those two questions, right? Actually, this goes back to this Kevin Taweel event that I'll be hosting. It's not part of this course, to be clear. It's actually not even part of my job at McGill. I'm doing it for fun. It goes back to that, like, Kevin Taweel is amazing at that stuff. And that's one of the reasons he's viewed as a legendary leader in Silicon Valley. He knows, like, how to prioritize. So that means he knows which problems he needs to solve, which problems he needs to pass on. He also knows which problems he needs to ignore in the short term. I remember hearing from his co-founder of Asurion, a guy called Jim Ellis. And Jim said, Kevin knows which fires to walk past. Most people see a fire, they're like, get me some water, right? And then he's just like, can deal with that later. These are like really important judgment things. Anyway, so like, hopefully what I do in this topic can be useful in a very specific example of this broader class of super important decisions in the real world, which is that it helps you to not need to go and do extensions of basic valuation in a DIY way, but maybe even points you to do it a delegated smartly way, right? Now, I've been cryptic so far in terms of what extension we're talking about, right? I said extension, but like there's a million ways that we can extend. And by the way, let me emphasize that there are a million ways that we could extend basic valuation. And in this course, I'm only going to focus on one. The focus is going to be specifically on how to value flexibility, okay? Because one of the things I want you to notice is, if you interpret every example that we did in topic 1, you should notice that we modeled exactly 0 flexibility, right? We basically said, do the project or don't do the project. And if you do the project, you're not adjusting to what happens. Like you're implementing the project in one way. It's like, if you do this project, you spend 50 million this year, 50 million next year, 25 million the year after that. And then you're selling like 20 million in the 4th year, and that's growing by 30, right? It's like, it's only modeling one path of possibility. Do we agree with that statement? Right? Look, when that's what we're modeling, that's what we're assuming, right? So if we're not allowing for the possibility of something in our math model, we have ignored it. That's a fundamental truth of logic, right? So what that means is, a fundamental truth of what we did in topic 1 is that we assumed projects have no flexibility, or firms have no flexibility in which additional projects they're going to do in the future yada, yada, yada. Flexibility is valuable. And so if we have ignored flexibility, and flexibility impacts value, it means we have not perfectly calculated value. Do we agree with that? Now, of course, there's a problem with flexibility, which is you want to ask who has the flexibility and will they exercise that flexibility in a way that adds value or subtracts value, right? Let's take an example, right? We've got case study 1 in this course, right? And I have decided to give folks, if they want it, flexibility to delay submitting by 3 weeks, correct? And here's the thing with flexibility. You guys can exercise that flexibility in a good way or a bad way, right? A good way is you give yourself a little bit more time so that you don't need to be panicked and rushed. You still work hard in your whole portfolio of tasks, including your other course, your other life obligations that are very, very important. I'm not saying that jokingly. Look, you guys know that I know, right? I'm going through the same stuff right now. So, right, you can do flexibility the right way. In that case, you are adding value, right? You are making yourself better off by intelligently making use of that flexibility. But we also know that people can take flexibility and use it to make mistakes. For instance, in the context of an extension for the case study, you can be like, oh, nice, I got an extra 3 weeks now. I'm going back to YouTube to watch some cat videos, right? So that you use it as an excuse to take the worst vacation in the history of mankind, where you're not actually interacting with too many other people, but you're like doing something that's just, you'll end up regretting after the fact, and you just end up delaying a bigger problem down the road because in 3 weeks you'll have to do that and you'll have to do everything else, right? That's like the bad side of flexibility, is if the person makes the wrong decisions. Now, it could be the wrong decisions because you're young and you make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. I'm old and I make mistakes, right? But it also could be you make mistakes because you're supposed to make decisions to benefit shareholders, but you make decisions to benefit yourself selfishly, right? So conflicts of interest can also lead to flexibility being bad, right? That's why when I hire someone to do something, if I don't know them well, right, or if I think there's major reasons that they might not want to do what I want them to do, I put restrictions on what they're allowed to do, right? It's to limit their flexibility because I don't trust how they're going to exercise flexibility. This is related to something called contract design, where you take contract design from the perspective of resolving conflicts of interest. It's actually one of the areas that I do academic research in, is contract economics. Right? So there's all these, honestly, there's like so many interesting questions here, right? And what we're going to do in this course is we're going to think about how can we tackle valuation so that we properly recognize the value of flexibility in projects. And there's going to be something interesting with our modeling apparatus here, which is in the process of answering that question, what is the value of this project if we correctly model the type of flexibility available in the project, right? If we do that, right, what is the project worth? But we're going to, in order to answer that question, we're going to have to answer another question that's also pretty interesting and important at a practical level, which is going to be, what is the right way to exercise your flexibility? So we're going to find out two things at the same time: optimal use of flexibility and the optimal value that we can generate from a project in the shadow of flexibility. I think that's pretty cool. Even if it's Planet McGill, I think that's pretty cool. Okay, that's what we're going to do. And my goal is to try to do it in a way that is as understandable in a plain English logical sense as I can try to make it. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about not just how a nerd like me can get all excited about it, but how I can simplify it to its most basic ingredients. Now, that's not to say that it's easy. Definitely this topic tends to be the toughest topic for students. Okay, so that's just to be upfront. You know, this is the toughie for most folks. The good news is everyone is taking the same topic. So you guys are all in it together kind of thing. And I do curve to the most generous thingy every single year. So, you know, you don't need to be worried about something like that, I don't think. But yes, you know, that's not to say that you can shirk your responsibility on learning this topic. I hope I've made a case to justify why you would want to at least know something from this topic. I actually believe that it's valuable. I'm actually going to tell you guys maybe one reason why I think it's valuable right now before I even start covering material. There's going to be a pretty basic and intuitive punchline that comes out of this topic, right? Because you're going to learn problem-solving techniques. So you're going to learn modeling tools. But I also want you to, this is my normal 5 a.m. alarm. That's when I usually wake up. So what was I saying? Okay. You're going to learn like mathy stuff, right? But I also want you to learn from this topic intuitive stuff, right? Like, because the intuitive stuff you can actually bring with you in your job, even if you're not a technical expert to do the mathy stuff, okay? And look, the good news is the intuitive stuff is actually, it's pretty simple and it's pretty universal. And I can boil it down to the following. When is flexibility most valuable? It is most valuable in environments where your underlying project offers you the most flexibility. So the more flexible a project, holding all else equal, the value of flexibility goes up. I mean, that seems pretty intuitive because by definition, if there's no flexibility, flexibility is valueless by definition, correct? And if there is flexibility and you use it in the right way, you use your flexibility to react to things that you learn, to cut your losses and to magnify your gains, that's a good thing, correct? Right, so this is why more flexibility, holding all else equal, should add to the value of flexibility, okay? There's another thing that matters a lot, which is uncertainty. The more uncertainty you have, the more there's value to flexibility. Look, if you've got no uncertainty, why do you need to keep things flexible? You know the right thing to do, right? Flexibility is important when you have no clue right now what the right thing to do over the life of the project is. Because when you don't have a clue, if you commit to it today, you're committing to something like this, right? Whereas by flexibility, you could be like, I'm not going to overcommit right now, and I'll take a wait and see approach, and I'll make adjustments as I learn things, right? So in environments with a lot of uncertainty, right, flexibility is more valuable too. Do we agree with that? Does that seem to make sense? Now there's a third ingredient. The third ingredient is when you are giving the flexibility to someone else as opposed to yourself. Giving them flexibility is more valuable when you trust them more. Because if you don't trust them, you're worried that they will use flexibility the wrong way. They will use it to watch cat videos on YouTube rather than properly manage their time. So do we agree? When you delegate flexibility, the value of flexibility is higher the more you trust the person that you delegate to. Those, to me, are the three fundamental intuitive drivers of the value of flexibility. And I think it's actually really important to remember that in the business world, because you start to realize from the first principle that it's useful for you to try to maximize the amount of flexibility you have in a project. Because when you design a project, you can design it with limited flexibility, with less flexibility, or with more flexibility. Unless there's strong reasons to want to commit to a path, you probably want to design it so as to have more flexibility. That's an interesting lesson to take out of those three principles. Yes? Seems sensible? Right? Nodding is always good, because then I can make sure that like I'm saying things that make sense. Here's another lesson, right? When you realize that in a world with a lot of uncertainty, and in a world with a lot of like, right, when you're deciding, do I want to have more or less flexibility in my project, you know, it's useful to think, well, how much uncertainty do I have? And how much trust do I have? And what this tells me as well is I should particularly design a lot of flexibility in a project when I am living in a world where there is a lot of uncertainty, and when I trust the person I'm giving the flexibility to. Do we agree with that statement too? By the way, it sounds pretty simple when I say it, right? Because we didn't need to do any math to agree on this. It's a simple idea, but let me tell you, it's an idea that people forget to consider all the time. Right? Let me give you an example. Right? What you guys are going through right now with your portfolio of your learning environment, right? Our current environment is an environment with a lot of uncertainty, correct? I have never experienced an environment as a teacher where there has been more uncertainty, where I have not known what the right way to go about teaching you is. This never happened in my life before at this level of magnitude, right? So I am living, if I think of my course as a project, I am implementing my project in the realm of very high uncertainty. One of the things I do in my project design is decide how much flexibility I give to my students. And so when I'm deciding how much flexibility I give to my students, well, we can see, because there's a lot of uncertainty relative to the past, I should probably give more flexibility because there's more uncertainty. But here's another thing that I'll say. I have never lived in a time in my life where I have more economic reason to trust you. Because the main reason I'm worried about trusting you in normal times is I know that if you guys are given, for instance, an extension on a case, that one of your options on what to do with that extension is to go get plastered on Saint Laurent, which is good for you in, I don't know if Saint Laurent is still where people go to get plastered, but I was born in Montreal, so I kind of know a little bit of stuff, but I'm also old now, so I'm, you know, my information is stale. But in any case, my main worry is that you guys are going to be myopic and end up just not focusing enough on your learning and focusing on short-term, you know, utility, right? The kind of thing where you're like, you're happy in the moment, but like afterwards you regret having done it, right? That's my main source of trust, is that you guys are young and it's very normal. I was there, you know, as well. It's very normal to make that mistake. That's my worry. That's my main source of a little bit worried to trust the judgment of a student. And when I think about it right now, like your opportunities for making that mistake, it's not always a mistake. Everyone needs to have a bit of fun, right? But like your opportunity to do that has gone way down. It is lower than it's ever been before, right? Like right now, your alternative is, should I do I'm not even sure if it's possible to do this. Like I'm what I call myself a level 2 Zoom expert. Maybe you guys are level 97 and you figured out how to play beer pong on Zoom. But like, you know, maybe that's what you, like, that is your outside option. You know, like, I can study for ACF or I can do Zoom pong, right? Doesn't seem like a good substitute for the real thing. And so I'm less worried that you're going to go and like waste your time in a way that hurts you from a learning standpoint. I have never trusted you more. It's not because I trust you. It's just I trust that you guys have limited options at the moment. But what does that mean? The environment that we live in right now has the most uncertainty I've ever had and has the least amount of reasons not to trust you. So if I'm designing my project, should I put a lot of flexibility in it or should I put very little flexibility in it? Does someone want to just venture what my rationalization should be? Just please someone say, right? More flexibility or less flexibility? Optimal solution.
I think more flexibility.
More flexibility for sure, right? More flexibility for sure. I think, you know, I've just given you guys my logic from before I started teaching you guys. So you guys may have noticed that I put a lot of, like, the only reason that if you read the syllabus that there is, it doesn't look like there's a lot of flexibility because there's a concrete plan. There's only one reason why the syllabus looks that way. Because I was told that I had no choice. I had to put it in there. If I had complete control, I would have literally put the maximum, more flexibility than I've ever put ever in my life. But I think you guys can see, as we have been doing this, I have tried to learn as much from you guys as possible. And I have tried to make use of flexibility by making adjustments on the basis of what you guys tell me. You think that's a fair representation of how I've gone about doing it? Right? So, you know, so by the way, I think this suggests that I practice what I preach. Would you say that this has been your experience in all of your learning? Right? So for instance, this idea of weekly tests, does that sound like a policy that is about giving you more flexibility? Or does it sound like a policy that's about giving less flexibility? Does someone want to tell me which one it feels more like? Less flexibility, right? So, right, my point being, like, look, I feel super strongly about this, right? I made one specific decision in this environment that is guided by the principles that I teach in this topic. And my point is, I am willing to like defend my perspective almost to the death or something like that. But notice that not everyone, even at a business school, makes the same decisions as me. And you can decide for yourself whether you believe in my perspective being the right perspective or whether you believe in the alternative, that in an environment like we live like today, we should give minimal flexibility. Right? So my perspective was very different. So I guess in some sense, if you think that the right design question was to give minimum flexibility in this environment, then maybe you're going to disagree with a lot of what I say in this topic. But if you agree with me, maybe what we're going to do in this topic is going to give you a little bit more of a nerdy Planet McGill justification for why at least I believe it makes perfect sense. Right? But I do want to highlight, I actually really like the example that I just gave. A, because it's a concrete example for me. I've felt it both internally in terms of how I make my course and externally in terms of how other people thought I should make my course, because there was major disagreements there. And to me, it tells me something. It tells me that, look, I believe that I'm right. Okay, so whatever, for better or for worse, right? But it also tells me that there's a lot of old school thinking in business, including in business schools, that completely ignores the principles that I'm going to be highlighting in this topic. And if that statement is true, And if you think that my approach on things and my perspective on things adds value, and there's a very easy way for you to answer that question to yourself. It's to ask yourself, do you prefer your user experience in a world in the flexible regime like I've implemented as much as I've been allowed to? Or do you prefer the user experience in the more regimented military regime that you've maybe experienced in some of your other courses? The answer to that question gives you a really nice personal experience on the value of flexibility. Because value here is how effectively you learn, right? And if you feel you learn better in an environment that responds to your needs, then that suggests to you that you believe flexibility is valuable. And if you believe flexibility is valuable, and you believe that the business world has old school thinking that only thinks about things like topic one, isn't that an opportunity for you in your career? Because if you become really good at both valuing and optimizing flexibility, you now have an edge with regards, like vis-a-vis others, right? So I do want you guys to sit and think about that a little bit. Is topic two a potential source of relative advantage for you compared to both your historical peers, right, the old school, and your future peers, the current school and the future school, who do not properly think through how flexibility can be optimized? To me, like, if I was sitting in your shoes and I'm thinking about how I want to like develop my competencies, I would actually be saying to myself, by the way, I did say this to myself many years ago. That's why I've thought about this topic a lot. And I mean, this is a topic that I do a little bit of consulting on, actually. The notion of like doing this valuation stuff and things like that. But, and you know, oh yeah, so like I'll just speak for myself, right? At some point in my life when I realized like topic one stuff misses this out, and there are these tools that allow us to explore this a little bit more rigorously, topic two style, like we're going to be covering here. When I realized that, I'm like, look, even though no one has ever taught it to me, I should teach it to myself, because seems like a little bit of a secret where like other people are just doing what they get taught. And if I become good at this, there are some environments, you know, one example is in the startup space. Startup space is an environment with a lot of uncertainty, where flexibility design and trying to get it right can really move the needle. And so I should try to become good at this so that I become uniquely valuable in certain domains, right? That's at least how my thinking goes, right? I mean, there's a venture capitalist that I like a lot. His name is Bill Gurley. Gurley is Gurley. And he has a really, really great, I'm going to just paraphrase the quote because I don't really remember it exactly. But he has this really great statement that he makes where he says, look, you know, some people, you know, when they're thinking about their careers, they take a look at the game that's played by everyone else in that career, and they just focus on how to play that game really well, right? So, you know, they walk into the stadium, they see the football field, and they see like a quarterback throwing a ball to the wide receiver, and all they focus on is like, how do I play this game well? Like, how can I throw a better spiral? How can I get a bit more exit velocity on my toss? You know, how can I pay attention to the defense when the defensive scheme is usually like this? So on. They just focus, they look at the game and they just focus on that game, which is great. You can build a great career doing that, right? You know, Tom Brady doing pretty well for himself. He's probably the most famous quarterback in the history of the NFL, the National Football League, right? Yeah, you can do fabulous on that. But Gurley emphasizes like, look, there are some pretty special people that walk in the stadium and look at the game and start thinking like, okay, this is a fine game. A lot of really great players in this game, but wouldn't it be better if the game was played a bit differently? And they start thinking about, how can I redefine the game, right? So that the game is better suited to my unique skills. Because I'm not Tom Brady, right? I'm not Tom Brady. I'm not Shaquille O'Neal. I'm not Wayne Gretzky. I'm not Babe Ruth, right? Like, none of these professional sports things are going to work out well for me, no matter how hard I try. So I start to think about changing the game, right? Changing the game to better leverage your unique set of skills. Actually, that's a pretty unique thing. That's a mindset that is really rare. But the people who do it well are honestly the ones that have the most spectacular outcomes, right? And again, like, I would say, looking at the field, basic valuation, and saying, well, look, fine, there's basic valuation, but I want to change it. I want to do extended valuation where I value flexibility, because I think I can model it better than most other people. Most other people don't even think about it. They don't even understand the assumptions they make when they're doing the basic valuation. Since I've got deeper knowledge, I can do that, and that's a little bit better, right? That's an example of changing the game, right? So, view this as maybe an example of the broader thing. Play your own game and design your game to your skill set. I think that might be the most important thing I say in today's class, to be honest. I'm not going to test you on it, but like, it's important. And by the way, if you design your own game and you think, it's not just that you design the game to suit your own skills, you design it to suit your own ambitions, your own preferences. And people who do that are happier in life too. And I think we're all realizing right now that matters a lot, right? So, okay, this was a little bit of a tangent. I did not expect to say this, but maybe interesting. I don't know. Or maybe this is all stuff that your parents taught you when you were 7, in which case I've got some catching up to do as a parent. But and my daughter's 13. But all right, are we ready to start? All right, cool stuff. Let's go ahead and do that. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? So as I said, what we're doing is we're extending basic valuation. Now, in this topic, I'm going to actually break it down into two pieces. Basically, what I'm going to do, again, I think I've already talked about the goal. So the first half of this slide that you see right now, I've already mentioned, right? The extension we're doing is valuing flexibility. We're going to figure out how to do that. I think I was upfront and honest, right? We're not going to be perfectly rigorous, and we're not going to focus on how to do it exactly in the real world. Our goal is really more to get ballpark-ish insights. Does it add a little bit of value, or does it add a lot of value? Things like that, right? So we want to do that, but the reality is, remember I was saying, like, you don't have people like jump on a 2-wheel bike right away as a 1.5-year-old and literally roll them down like Mont Royal or something, not Mont Royal, whatever, like, no, the actual mountain, right? You don't do that. That's insane. I don't do that for you guys either. So even within Planet McGill, inside the boundaries of Planet McGill, I'm not even going to skip straight to this, because I'm going to have to build some basics for you first. And that has to do with the tools that we're going to be using in developing our extension. It's going to turn out that in developing our extension, we are going to use an alternative to DCF and to comps valuation as a valuation toolkit that is derived in other courses and that you guys may have seen a little bit of, but not much of, for most of you, in your pre-existing finance coursework. And this is what we call derivative valuation techniques, right? So valuing what we call financial derivatives, which are financial securities whose values depend on the values of other securities, right? So things like forwards and futures, call options, put options, things like that. And if you've studied that a little bit, you know that finance, nerdy academics, this is actually a case where nerdy academics changed the real world in terms of how the real world thinks about valuing this stuff. It's really one of the great examples of academia, like having, like changing modern, like real world practices. That's why the development of this stuff led to Nobel Prizes in economics, for instance. But there are two fundamentally different ways that people in practice try to value financial derivatives. And so I'm gonna first introduce those two different techniques in the context of financial derivatives so that we understand the technique. And then after I do that, I then will talk about how we can use those exact same techniques to value corporate flexibility in a project. Does that make sense? Right? So, you know, I know for some people, they don't give two fucks about financial derivatives. Okay? That's okay. Like, I get it. I mean, I care about them, but like, I get that someone might not be naturally interested in that. So the only thing I can say is that even if you're not interested in that, you have a vested interest in learning this because it's useful for valuing flexibility. Now, you might also say, I'm not interested in valuing flexibility, in which case my response to that is, okay, well, you have no choice because I decided to put it in the course. So that part, you know, we can agree to disagree. But I get it if you are not naturally interested in valuing flexibility for a financial security. I mean, a lot of reasonable people are not interested in derivatives markets. The only thing I say is that that's a stepping stone to being able to do the corporate finance thing that we focus on in this course, okay? So that's what we're doing now, is we're doing part one. I call it a review of derivatives valuation. Because if you guys got like the full version of Finance 1 and Finance 2, you should have seen the basic techniques that I'm covering. The basic techniques are static replication and dynamic replication. Static replication is related to something that you might remember, put-call parity. If you don't remember it, don't worry. I'm building it from scratch here, okay? I'm building it from zero. And then there's dynamic replication, which is related to something called the binomial model, or specifically the multi-period binomial model. And so we'll introduce both techniques and we'll do some examples. And then you may have heard of the Black Scholes formula. You probably have not seen a derivation of the model, but you've maybe seen the formula. So I'll reintroduce the formula and talk a little bit about its assumptions and stuff like that as well. But all of these things I'm covering because we end up using them very intricately in part two, where we use those techniques in corporate finance. So there is nothing I am doing in part one that we don't explicitly end up using in part two. I trimmed all the fat. So anything that would be in derivatives treatment, financial derivatives treatment, that we do not need for our topic, I have chopped away, right? Trimmed the fat. So the fat has been trimmed. Everything that's in, my point is, you want to understand part one before you move on to part two. Sound good? All right. By the way, what I have here is something called a payoff diagram. And this payoff diagram tells you what you need to know about a very specific financial derivative. What is a payoff diagram? Because again, you know, some of you guys may have actually not seen that. And if you're feeling nervous right now because you have never seen any of this stuff, my goal here is to make you comfortable from the ground up. So here's one thing I will say to whoever is here right now or whoever listens after the fact. If you have not seen any of this material previously, and as I am covering it, you feel like things are unclear, please tell me. Do not feel bad, because you should not feel bad, right? It's difficult for me to put myself in the shoes of someone who hasn't seen anything, because that's me from like 20 years ago. It's a long time ago. I have difficulty remembering what I had for breakfast, and it's only 5:30 a.m. right now, right? So that means I sometimes accidentally take knowledge for granted. It's not deliberate. And so if I've done that, just do not hesitate. Say like, Jiro, I don't know what this means. I'm not going to be like, you know, what's wrong with you? I'm going to be like, oh, thank you for letting me know, because my goal is to build this from the ground up. But so let me explain what this figure says. What this figure says is the following. The Y, you got your Y-axis and your X-axis, right? Now, a financial derivative, this is specifically for a call option. What is a call option? A call option is a financial security that is an agreement between a buyer and a seller. The buyer of the call option receives the right, but not the obligation, to purchase an underlying security, a different security, at a specific price called the strike price K, which is agreed upon today. But they get to buy that agreed upon security at some point in the future at time T, known as the maturity date of the contract, for the agreed upon price K. So an example would be, I buy a call option that gives me the right but not the obligation to buy a specific stock for $100 in 1 year. So I own that security. What that means is, if the stock is worth $50 in a year, I say thanks, but no thanks, because I'd have to be an idiot to buy something that's worth $50 for $100. So $100, if the stock is worth 50, I don't get it, and I get no money. I just walk away. Do we agree? Meanwhile, I have the right to buy it in a year for 100. If it's worth 200, I say, yes, victory. I don't probably say that to the person's face, but like I say, give me my security, and here's your $100. So I get something that's worth $200 in exchange for 100. I win out $100. This blue curve tells me my financial outcome in 1 year, that's the Y-axis, as a function of the value of that underlying asset in 1 year. So if in 1 year the stock is worth 50, I get nothing. If it's worth 100, I still get nothing. If it's worth $101, I get $1 because I receive something worth 101 and I pay 100. If it's worth $102, I get $2 of profit because I pay 100 for something worth 102. So as you can imagine, what is the slope of this line? Someone want to tell me? If the option contract is to purchase one stock, then the slope is equal to 1. Because for every $1 that the stock is above the strike price, I'm $1 happier. So this blue line is in some sense telling me what the financial contract is when I buy the security. I never lose money, or I never need to pay anything in a year because the contract gives me the right but not the obligation, right? But if the thing is worth enough money, the thing being the underlying stock, then I start winning money. This is the value of that security today. You don't need to think about this right now. We'll maybe re-refer to it later. Sound good? But we are going to be using payoff diagrams a lot with one of our techniques. It's going to be all about payoff diagrams. So we are going to want to be comfortable with the notion of visually representing a financial derivative or a project later on in this manner. It's going to be core to what we do in one of our techniques for this topic. But does this make sense so far? Right? So every financial, well, not every, many financial derivatives can be visually represented in this manner. By the way, what I've described here is what we call a European call option, in the sense that we have the right and not the obligation, but not the obligation to buy the underlying stock exactly at the maturity date. There are also some derivatives that are what we call American style derivatives, where we can actually exercise our flexibility, not just on the maturity date, but any time between now and the maturity date. So that we don't just have the flexibility on whether we buy or don't buy at maturity. We also have another dimension of flexibility, which is we have a flexibility on timing. Do we buy now or do we wait and see? It turns out that American style derivatives do not fit nicely into this picture, because when you don't know when the action's going to happen, it's tough to put things in one snapshot of time, right? Because let's remember, with this picture is happening. It's not happening right now. It's happening at maturity. It's happening at a well-defined date in the future. But with an American style derivative, we don't know if the payoff is going to happen in a year, in 6 months, in 3 months, in 2 months, in 77 seconds, right? We don't know those things. And so it's tough to just put things at one point in time like this. So it's going to turn out that this technique of drawing pictures like this to understand flexibility, it only makes sense in European style contexts where there's no flexibility on timing, but only flexibility on what you do on very specific dates. So those are going to be the cases where we use this technique. When there's also flexibility on timing, we're going to use a different technique that requires more effort. That's the second technique we do, but I'm not going to talk about that one until we finish talking about this one. Are folks okay with this?
Yeah, Jiro, can I ask a question?
Of course.
About this, you talk about the slope of the intrinsic value, right? What does that mean? Like the slope, what does that mean?
Okay, well, remember the contract says, let's take an example. You've got Jiro stock, and you own a call option that allows you to buy Jiro stock for $100 in 1 year. If Jiro stock is worth less than 100, do you buy it? Yes or no?
Yeah.
No.
Obviously. Oh, no.
If the stock is worth less than 100, would you want to buy it for 100?
No, I won't, obviously.
No, right? So that's why this is flat at 0. Because if Jiro stock is worth less than 100, you just walk away. What happens when you walk away? You get nothing. Do we agree on that?
Yeah.
Now, what happens if Jiro stock is worth $110? Do you buy it?
Yeah, $10 profit, yeah.
$10. Notice for every dollar above 100, you get one extra dollar, which is why this slope is 1.
Right, okay. Makes sense, thank you.
No problem. By the way, I put in my slides some other examples of financial derivatives. I don't think it's necessary for me to talk about this in my lecture, right? At a practical level, when you're reviewing this class, you can read this slide just for general knowledge. But I won't even test you on the derivatives in this slide on an exam. If I give you guys a financial derivative, I would precisely define it. And actually, I'm pre-committing. I'm not going to give you guys a financial derivative to value on the final exam. I'm going to give you guys a project. At a practical level, what you will want to be comfortable with in this class is actually going to be just 2 derivatives. Call option, European call option, also American. So European and American call option, but for this discussion that we're going to be having right now, it's going to be European. That's the derivative that I was talking about in words on my previous slide. And then another derivative that you're going to end up wanting to know a little bit about is something called a cash or nothing binary call. But I'm going to introduce that to you guys a little bit later. Because even if you've studied derivatives, there's a good chance you didn't see that. But it's a very, very fundamental derivative that I'll introduce later. I want you to just know those 2 derivatives. And that's going to allow you to do everything you need to do for this course. So I list some other derivatives here. That's just to kind of give you guys an appreciation for the fact that there's literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands of different derivatives in the real world. Derivatives markets are huge. If I were to quote our friend, Mr. Trump, he likes to use the word huge for some reason, probably because a lot of things about him are not huge. Okay, but let's not get political on this stuff. Certainly not relevant here. Okay, so I'm going to just skip this slide. I just want, just to repeat, for anyone who's thinking about exam world or something like that, you need to know 2 types of derivatives in this class. Call option, cash or nothing binary call. You do not know what cash or nothing binary call is. I will introduce that later. All right? So, okay, I said you only need to know call option. There's also something called a put option that I'm just going to highlight right now. Remember I said a call option, you won't need to use it for my course, but for a simple illustration right now, I'm going to use it. What is a put option? A put option is another derivative contract, but instead of you having the right but not the obligation to purchase a stock or an underlying asset at a given strike price on a given maturity date, a put option gives you the right to sell instead of the right to buy. So you have the right to sell Jiro stock for $100 in a year. Well, what that means is if Jiro stock is worth more than 100, are you going to sell it? Yes or no? Obviously not. Because why would you sell something worth 110 for 100 when you can just go sell it in the market for 110? You'd just be burning money, right? So a put option, if Jiro stock is worth more than 100, you get nothing because you walk away. You just keep the stock and you're net zero. But what if Jiro stock is worth 50? Jiro stock is worth 50. Now you go again, victory, right? And you say, awesome, I get to sell this fool. Well, he wasn't necessarily a fool when he entered into the agreement. What we call an ex post fool. Something that's worth 50 for 100, and you cha-ching yourself to $50. right? Make sense? This is the payoff diagram for a call option. We just talked about it a couple of slides ago. This is the payoff diagram for a put option. So far, so good? I want to show you guys the basic principle of our first derivative pricing technique, which is what I call static replication. And what static replication does is it gets us a formula for one derivative off of the prices of other stuff. And I'm going to highlight this with the example I have on this slide. And this example is the mathematical formulation for something called the put-call parity. And let me explain. I'm going to show you two ways of making the same thing. Okay? And this actually starts to level up our comfort with payoff diagrams. Here's what I want you to notice. Look at this top panel. You guys can see my little hand waving about, yes or no? Yeah, good. Everyone agrees this was the payoff diagram for a call option? Yes? Now, notice, if you own a call option, this is your payoff at the maturity date, yes? Now, let's say you own a call option and you own some cash that you're investing at the riskless rate. And let's specifically assume that you own an amount of cash that gives you exactly an amount equal to the strike price X of this call option. In other words, in your bank account right now, you have an amount of cash equal to present value of receiving strike price at time T. Are we on the same page here? Do we agree that we would be receiving X dollars at time T, no matter what the underlying asset is worth, because it's riskless? Are we okay with that? So notice, this is a portfolio. It is a portfolio that owns the call option and owns cash. What is the combined payoff of those two things? We just take this and we add this. Do we agree that it gives us this? Let's call this portfolio A. Here's the cool thing that I want to point out. This is not the only way for us to get this exact same payoff, because I'm now going to show you a second way to do it. Instead, we could own the put option on the exact same asset with the exact same maturity date and the exact same strike price. Are we on the same page right now? Do we agree that this is what the payoff diagram for the put option looks like? Notice, if we take this and we add to that the actual underlying asset, the stock. Well, the stock has a payoff. The payoff of the stock is equal to the payoff of the stock. That's just a y equals x. Do we agree? By definition, the payoff of the stock, y-axis, is equal to the payoff of the stock, x-axis. In other words, y is equal to x. Do we agree? Right? If the stock is worth $100, owning the stock gives you $100. If the stock is worth $157.27, the payoff from having that is $157 and, oh, I don't remember the number of pennies I said anymore. 27 cents, I think. So this is just a slope that starts at a line that starts at 0 and has a slope of 1 all the time. Are we okay with that? Well, notice, this starts at 0 This starts at X, because if the stock is worthless and you sell something worthless for an amount of dollars X, you've benefited X because you gave something that's worthless and you received X for it. Are we on the same page? So when this underlying asset is worth nothing, you have something worth X plus something worth 0, you're just getting X. Do we agree? And notice what happens. As the stock price goes up, for every dollar of stock price that goes up initially, you lose $1 on the put option because the thing you're giving up is worth more and more money, so your profit goes down and down and down. Do we agree? But notice, you lose $1 here, but you gain $1 from owning the asset that exactly offsets. Yes? So stays flat until you get to a strike price of X. Once you get a strike price of X, you hit the downside limit on a put option and you're just walking away. So if you can sell the asset for $100, well, you don't care if it's worth 110 or $1 trillion. Either way, you get nothing. Do we agree with that? So you're no longer losing anything on the put option, but you're still gaining something on the underlying asset. So now the position goes up by $1, $1, $1, $1, $1. Do we agree? Okay, now we are getting to the most important part of our discussion. This and this are the same. So you should be willing to pay the same price for the two. This and this should cost exactly the same money. What happens if this is more expensive than this? What do you do if you're a smart player in financial markets and can easily buy, like go long, which means buy, or go short, which means sell something you don't own?
You buy low and you sell high.
Very good, Pote. Exactly. I don't remember which I said was high. Like if this is more expensive and this is cheaper, you should buy the cheaper thing. Maybe this costs you $10 and you should sell the more expensive thing. Maybe you can sell this for $20. Well, you pocket money right now, right? Because you received $20 from selling this and you paid $10 by buying that. Your net benefit is $10 right now. And guess what? Your obligations in the future exactly cancel each other out. This is what we call an arbitrage. It is free money, baby. You got $10 now and everything cancels out in the future. Gotta love that. You want to do as much of that as you can. Guess what? Everyone wants to do as much of that as they can. And so if everyone is selling this and everyone is buying this, what's going to happen to the price of this? It's going to go up. What's going to happen to the price of this? It's going to go down. It's going to keep on going down until $20 and $10 converge, probably somewhere in the middle, like roughly 15. And those things are going to now be worth the same. Does that make sense to folks? By the way, this may sound kind of silly and trivial. It is not. It is mega fundamental. Because notice, what I have just told you, these things have to have the same price. What that means is, this is notation. Can everyone kind of see this, or do I need to make it bigger? Bigger?
No, can you make it bigger?
No problem. Of course I can. I'm doing this for the first time. Is this better?
Maybe you can stop sharing the screen so it can.
Oh, wait a second. Yeah, of course. I completely forgot that. That is the fundamental problem. Is this better now?
Yeah, looks like so.
I can try a few different things here. Is this better? Or no?
Yeah, it's a little better. Yeah.
If this is a little bit better? Wait. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. Give me a sec. I'm not convinced that it's better. I'm trying something here, sorry. Is this better? Can you see it more clearly now?
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
because like I saw some light glare coming from outside, so I've just tried to cover it with some board thing.
Okay, it's better.
All right. What do I mean by this? And I'm sorry, you know what? Yeah, there's other things I can do. Give me 1 second. Is it? Motherfucker. I'm trying to like make it closer, but I have limited ability given the gear that I need to self-provide. So, okay, this didn't make much of a difference. Apologies. What is this? This is just the price of the call option on the underlying with a strike price K and a maturity date T. Plus the present value of receiving K at time T. So this is cash. This is the call, right? This must be equal to the price of the put option with the same strike price K and the same maturity T plus the underlying asset's current price. So I'll just call this underlying at time 0. That's the price of the underlying right now. By the way, in this illustration, I have made one assumption for simplifying purposes, is that the underlying asset does not pay any dividends from now until time T. You need to be a little bit more careful if it pays dividends, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole in this class. Are we okay? So this is underlying. And again, no dividends is an assumption. And then this is the put. Right? What I said is, because this and this are two portfolios that give you exactly the same payoff, they must have the same price. So this needs to be equal. Do we agree? Well, notice, now we can get a simple formula. A simple formula for the price of the put option. Because all I need to do is subtract the underlying and notice, this is actually, to me, this is cool. I now have a formula for the price of a put option. If I know the price of the call option, I'll call it a matching call option because it's the same strike price and it's the same maturity date and it's the same underlying. But if I know that matching call option price and I know the present value of cash, meaning I know the riskless rate, and I know the price of the underlying, I now know the price of the put option, right? This gives me a formula for the price of a put option. And trust me, when people get this formula, there's a lot of effort that goes behind that. So the fact that you can get this pretty easily once you know this is like a huge simplifier of your life. Does that make sense to folks? So this is actually really cool as far as I'm concerned, because it's showing you that like once you know a few basic things, you can start to think about trying to price a really large number of different derivatives, right? Once you know the price of a call option, you can price a put option. This is what is called the put-call parity. This is the put-call parity. And it's just like when I learned the put-call parity, I didn't just view it as like, remember the put-call parity. Actually, to me, this was really, really eye-opening, because what I got from this example was not just the put-call parity. It is a way of thinking. And the way of thinking, I call it static replication. What I mean by that is you can pick a portfolio today. You never need to adjust it in the future. That's what makes it static instead of dynamic. And no matter what in the future, it's going to give you the same payoff as the thing you're interested in. So I am interested in the put option. And what I find is if I buy the call option, buy some cash, and sell the underlying, and I just do that once today at time 0, never adjust it again until time t, that portfolio gives me the same as this thing I'm interested in. And as a result, it needs to have the same price. So that if I can find a formula for that other portfolio, I now have a formula for this. Because those two things have to be equal, because if they're different, you can buy low and sell high and get free money. You can do an arbitrage. Make sense? So this is literally the essence of our first technique. I mean, it's actually, in some sense, you know, people love to talk about derivatives as being, oh, this is financial engineering, rocket science, yeah. No, it's not. It's pretty simple, actually. Like, there's a famous economist called Larry Summers. It's a bit of a controversial guy. He was once the president of Harvard. Got into a little bit of trouble on those things, but like he is actually a brilliant individual. And he actually once put it, I think he was trying to insult financial economists. He's like, you know, this stuff, all you're doing is you're learning how to price a 16-ounce bottle of ketchup off of an 8-ounce bottle of ketchup. 16-ounce bottle of ketchup price should be equal to 2 times the price of an 8-ounce bottle of ketchup for obvious reasons. Or more generally, you know, you can price, let's say you're interested in pricing a fruit salad that consists of only 2 apples and 1 orange. Well, the price of that fruit salad should just be equal to 2 times the price of an individual apple plus 1 times the price of an individual orange. Our first technique just does that. You can kind of think of it as like, you know, all you need to know, it's like, I think I used to love playing with Legos when I was a kid, right? It's like, look, you know, how do you replicate the thing you're interested in? You find out how many blue blocks you need of this shape, how many red blocks you need of that shape, and then you just build it, right? And once you know the ingredient list, you can just go to the Lego store and buy those individual blocks in their right quantities, and you figured out the value of that thing you're trying to build. That's what we do here. We're just breaking it down into individual Lego pieces and figuring out the value of each Lego piece, and then getting our total value for the structure. I think when Larry Summers said that, he was saying it in a way where he was trying to insult people in finance, but I actually don't view it as an insult, because actually it takes real skill to figure out, like, it's not all as easy as a 16-ounce bottle of ketchup is equal to 2 8-ounce bottles. Like, that trivializes the technique, because actually what you need to do oftentimes is you need to really understand your structure and break it down into the raw pieces, and that actually takes skill. So I'm actually very proud that this tool in finance is so simple that I feel I could have explained it to the 4-year-old version of myself playing with Legos. Like, that's actually a good thing because it makes it more believable, right? You know, it's not, you know, again, Larry Summers is a smart guy. Not sure if he's a good guy, but he's a smart guy. Let me just, I'm going to go back to sharing my slide. And I just want to show the more general principle is consider two portfolios. The first portfolio consists of X1 units of asset 1, X2 units of asset 2, all the way up to Xn units of asset n. Whereas the second portfolio consists of Xn plus 1 units of asset n plus 1, Xn plus 2 units of asset n plus 2, all the way to Xn plus m units of asset n plus m. And by the way, the two things can have overlapping assets in principle. You can always write it where there's no overlapping asset, but that's a nerdy thing. I'm not going to go into that. If these two portfolios have the same payoff in every state of the future world, i.e., regardless of what the payoff to the underlying asset is, then the two portfolios should have the same price. In other words, we should have this equation holding. If that does not happen, exactly as Proté mentioned, there is an arbitrage opportunity where you short the higher price portfolio and you buy the lower price portfolio. That creates buying pressure on the cheap thing. Its price goes up, right? You've got the expensive thing and you've got the cheap thing. You've got buy pressure on the cheap thing, price goes up. You've got sell pressure on the expensive thing, price goes down, until ding, 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 you're at the same price and the equation is holding, right? So that's why we believe these things should be the same. And that's why we believe what I had written on the slide, I know it's small now, but what I had written here, that's why I put the equal sign. And that forms the entire basis of what we do in our static replication technique in this course. Folks okay with this? So again, I mean, honestly, like, I will say the following is like, most people find this principle to be, once they understand what's being said, they're like, yeah, of course. I mean, this is trivial. I mean, that's what Larry Summers said, right? He's like, this is all trivial. But the thing is, it's trivial but powerful. You get so much mileage. I mean, you guys are going to see it. We are going to get a shitload of mileage off of just this simple principle. And we will also see how much we can like exploit the hell out of this for valuation. It's like, I mean, honestly, like, I guess I have my own way of teaching this, but like my view is like, this is like, this can be used in so many different ways and it's not emphasized enough. Even in a derivatives course, for some reason, I still for the life of me don't understand that. And in fact, let me actually highlight this. This is a blank slide. So I'm gonna go off of the blank slide right now. Yeah, I'm realizing in normal times, I have students print out their slides and come to the class and like they handwrite stuff as I am writing it because I think that like helps with the learning. So I guess if you are watching this in a recording right now, pause the video and print the slides. And once you're done printing it, come back and start writing some of the things I put on the board into your physical notes. All right? So let me just stop sharing this for the moment. And let's go back. You guys are back to seeing me in big, correct? I'm going to erase this. Literally, I'm jumping straight into the most useful thing about Technique 1 for this course. And remember how I told you guys you will only need to use 2 different derivatives in my class? One was the call option and one was this thing that you've never seen before that I said I'll teach you guys in this lecture, we're not going to understand why what I said was true. I'm first going to do it. I'm going to do an example first where you don't need to use that second thing that I haven't taught you yet. Okay, so I'll do it right now, where the only derivative you need to know is the call option, okay? This is a payoff diagram. When we do payoff diagrams with the context of a derivative, the y-axis, so all of this, it all happens at t equals big T. I'm sorry that this is difficult to read. What I'm saying is all of what I'm drawing here happens at a very specific date in the future, time t. Are we okay with that so far? And so a derivative has payoffs happening at time t, but where the payoff of the derivative, which is on the y-axis, payoff of derivative, financial derivative, is a function of the value of underlying asset. Remember, a derivative is something whose payoff depends on the value of something else, which we call the underlying asset. Underlying asset, and this is at time t, and this is the payoff of the derivative at time t. Are we okay so far? So look, I'm just going to create this random derivative right now. All right. I will call my derivative. I'm going to invent a new derivative on the fly here. I'm going to call it this derivative, the Racine Carre derivative. That is French for square root. And you guys will see, I'm very proud of myself. I just thought about this at the moment. So this is brand new, people. This is my Racine Carre derivative. It starts at 10. And up to 5, it goes up to 15. And then 10 goes down to 0. And then 15 goes up to 25. And then it's straight forever. So slope here is 0. Slope here is 1, right? We go from 10 to 15, up 5 over a distance of 5. And then we go down 15 over the next 5. So the slope here is -3. And then we go up 25 over the next 5. So the slope here is 5. And I think we understand why I called this the Racine Carre derivative, because it looks like a square root, right? But what I want to highlight is I picked a random fucking payoff diagram. The only thing that is, the only restriction that I have in the generic class of derivative I picked is that the payoff is what we call piecewise linear. It's basically kind of like we paste together a bunch of segments of lines. Do we agree with that statement? Yes or no? Notice that a lot of derivatives in the real world are piecewise linear. Put option, call option, piecewise linear. But there's so many other derivatives that are exactly like that. They are in the class of things where it's just a segment of lines. This line, then this line, then that line, then that line. We okay with this? I'm going to show you how we can price this, how we can get a value for this by just knowing the values of the underlying asset itself, the riskless asset, and every call option on that underlying asset. And we're going to use Larry Summers's little trivial, you know, Lego building technique. Let me show you. Just trying to figure out how I can show you given my limited board space. I'm going to assume that I can draw it here. Can you guys kind of see that? I know it's not ideal. I apologize. I'm thinking about this like the 4-year-old version of me. I look at this and I'm like, how do I build this? And the good news is there's a simple algorithm. I'm going to build it left to right. What do I notice about this left point? It starts at 10. And it has an initial slope of 1. Do we agree with that statement? So I start and I say, well, what Lego piece do I need to create a start at 10? To start at 10, that's easy. That's easy. That's cash, baby. If I hold a riskless bond with a face value of 10 that matures at time t, I've got my 10 bucks. 10 bucks. This is a holding of the riskless bond. Can you guys, oops, hopefully I didn't break my phone. Can you guys see if I write here? Yes? So I'm gonna call, huh?
Move the camera a little bit.
That better? So, by the way, I'm going to find a different way to build this. The different way, the lingo that we use in finance is a replicating portfolio. Replicating means copying, right? So I'm going to call this the replicating portfolio. And my first ingredient in the replicating portfolio is a riskless bond with a face value of $10 and a maturity date equal to what? Time t. And maturity t. That gives me this. If this is the only thing that I put in my Lego list, did I successfully copy the Racine Carre derivative or no? Obviously not. I'm pretty fucking off, right? But I'm actually moving in the right direction. I have matched this point. Now I want to match the early trajectory. So I want to create a slope of 1. How do I create an initial slope? When I say initial, I mean, how do I create a slope at the underlying asset of 0? Well, I just buy the underlying asset. Because what does the underlying asset payoff diagram look like? It was y equals x, remember? So it's got an initial value of 0, and it's got an initial slope of 1. So I now go and buy 1 underlying asset. So this is, I'm going to call this, I'm going to use some lingo. This is just going to be ingredient 1 by itself. Right? Ingredient 1 by itself. This is going to be ingredient 1 plus ingredient 2, where ingredient 2 is 1 unit of underlying. Are we okay with this so far? Does this look a little bit better than the last step? Because now notice I am matching it all the way here. So I am actually all good now until 5. I have matched the initial little bump in the Racine Carre derivative. The only problem is once I get to 10, once I get to 5, I'm now way off because it keeps going up and it should be going down. Do we agree with that? By the way, next step is maybe the most important step of this process to understand. I need to figure out how to lower the slope from +1 to -4 without screwing up the work I've already done. Do we agree? Yes or no? Right, by the way, I want to mention the importance of the notion of not screwing up what you already did. I'm not sure if you guys have ever done like a Rubik's Cube thingy, right? But this is like a big thing in like, Rubik's Cube, or I haven't done it myself, but my understanding, I've spoken to someone who does. Like a big part of the strategy when you're solving a Rubik's Cube is you're solving part by part. And then you get to this point where you've got like the wrong cubes in like 2 places. And you need to figure out how to swap those cubes without changing anything else, without screwing up the work you've already done. We need to figure out how to change the slope without screwing up what we did. In other words, without changing anything from 0 to 5. Are we okay? Do we understand that?
Yes.
Yes, good. Thank you for confirming that. The great news is there's an easy way to do it. It's easier than with a Rubik's Cube for sure. That's the call option, baby. That's the call option. Because what does a call option do? It gives you nothing until your strike price K, and then it gives you a slope of 1. So it takes a slope of 0 and transforms it to a slope of 1. So if you buy 5 call options, you increase your slope by 5 at the strike price, and you change nothing until the strike price, because everything before the strike price was 0, right? If you add n times 0 to anything, you have not changed the number. So the beauty of the call option is it allows you to change the slope here without changing anything from here to here. Does that make sense? And if you want to make the slope go up, you buy call options. If you want to make the slope go down, like we're doing here, you sell call options. You go short call options. So if we want to create this downwards trajectory that we need to do in order to match our Racine Carre derivative, we need to go short call options on the underlying, specifically with a strike price of 5 and a maturity date T. How many? We need to go short 4 units because we need to take the slope from +1 and transform it to a slope of -3. That's a change in slope of -4. Does that make sense? This is, if you have to re-listen to what I just said 5 times, do it to understand it. Or play with it on a piece of paper yourself, because this is the most important thing for you to understand in our technique here. So now we've got 1 plus 2 plus 3, where ingredient 3 is, so here I'm going to say for ingredient 2, long. Long means we buy. And for ingredient 3, we go short 4 units of a call option on, I'm just going to write it as U, on the underline with a strike price equal to 5, because the change in slope happens at 5. And maturity equal to T. And then we are now matched all the way up to 10. Does that make sense? Once you understand this, everything else is now easy because you're just going left to right, matching left to right. So what do we have? We go from a slope of -3 to a slope of +5. That's an increase of 8. So what is our fourth ingredient? Sorry, this is badly drawn, but right, our fourth ingredient is go long 8 units of call on U. But notice it's a different call option than what we had with ingredient 3. It's now a call option with a strike price of 10 because the increase in slope happens at 10, and maturity equal to T.
Hey, Jiro, can I ask a question?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, for the third part, like we shorted 4 units of call option, and we had the slope of 1. And why do we do that? For the why do we long 8? Like, shouldn't we do like 7? Like,
No, no, because we go from a slope of -3 to a slope of +5. To create an increase in slope of 8, you need to buy 8 call options. So it's always about the change in slope.
Okay. Okay.
Why did you think it would be 7? I'm actually kind of curious.
Because for the third part, like we shorted 4 units of call option.
Yeah,
Although
because,
we need
but the reason why it was 4 units is because we went from +1 to -3.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So to go from 1 to -3, you need to subtract 4.
Okay.
Yeah, that's important, right? So you really want to understand why it's all about the change in slope. Because it is all about the change in slope, for sure.
Okay. Okay. Thank
Are
you.
we okay with this?
Oh, it makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. We only have one more step. We are almost done. The only thing we need to do is change it from a slope of +5 to a slope of 0 at a strike price of 15. 1 + 2 + 3 + 4 + 5. So 5 is what? The slope goes from +5 to 0 at 15. So we go short 5 units because of the drop from 5 to 0. That's a drop of 5 of call on U with strike price equal to 15 and maturity equals to T. We are done replicating. And let me just, again, I want us to understand the lingo that I use. I call it static replication because notice we buy these ingredients just one time. We buy them right now at time 0, and then we're done. It's set it and forget it. We don't need to adjust our position later on, depending on whether the underline goes up or down. We just set it up, and no matter what happens in the future, our setup is perfect. So static just means once. That I'm highlighting this. It sounds maybe nerdy, but it's because the next technique we do is not going to be static. It's going to be dynamic. So that it is the fundamental difference between my 2 techniques that I present to you. Are we okay with this? Does that make sense? Does it, like, logically, does it make sense what we did? We literally looked at individual Lego pieces and figured out how to use those individual Lego pieces to exactly build the structure that we want to build. Thought I had another colored pencil somewhere, so I'm just trying to find it. Don't know where I put it. Okay. Our goal was to build this, and we built it using these pieces, Lego style, where these are all the different individual Lego blocks, and by putting them together, we ended up with what we wanted. And this building process is called static replication. And then when we apply our theorem of no arbitrage, right, we know that the price of this derivative should be the same as the price of this replicating portfolio, so that we get a formula, right? Our formula says price of Racine Carre derivative. That's what I mean by RC. Oh, can you even see that? No, right? Because of light. The price of the Racine Carre derivative at time 0 is equal to what? It's equal to getting $10 at time t and discounting by the riskless rate. That's the price of ingredient 1. Plus one unit of the underlying at time 0, minus, because we're going short, minus 4 times the call option on underlying, with a strike price of 5 at time t. Sorry, this is going to start being messy on my board just because I don't have enough space. But plus 8 times the call option price at time 0 of a different call that has a strike price of 10. Then finally, minus 5 times the call option at time 0 with a strike price of 15 and a maturity date t. I'm kind of aggravated that I've managed to somehow lose a pen without exiting my office, but in any case. Well, someone told me that green looks okay too, so I'm going to use green. This is the formula that we get for the price of the Racine Carre derivative now as a function of the price of other stuff, right? This is the price of the fruit salad when the fruit salad involves buying this, 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 and this, right? How many different ingredients do we have? We have the bond, we have the underlying, and we have 3 different call options. And we use those 5 ingredients to build up the thing we want. By the way, you might be like, okay, Jiro, you haven't really helped me that much because I don't know this, I don't know this, and I don't know this. And, you know, if I don't know all the inputs on the right-hand side of the equation, I cannot calculate the left-hand side of the equation. The answer is actually, if you are thinking that, congratulations, you are correct. And it's actually a very good point. That's why I'm going to teach you guys the Black Scholes formula. The Black Scholes formula is a formula to get a good guesstimate of this, a good guesstimate of that, and a good guesstimate of that, so that you can actually use this, which I think is pretty neat. Look, I'll talk about it later. The Black Scholes formula is not perfect, but it's still pretty cool that you can do a reasonable job for like a random derivative that I just drew out. And hopefully, in this example, what I've also convinced you is that it's actually not that complicated. Like logically, what we did here is pretty simple, right? The concept of replication is both simple and powerful. Folks okay with this? Yes or no? Okay. Thank you, Nandini. I want to level up this technique. This is actually the last thing I'm going to do today because, to be honest, I'm fairly tired. I haven't slept much these days. So I'll just, the other half of the review where I do the second technique, I'll just do it next week. I think this is enough to digest already. Okay? But I want to level it up to its full glory. Because right now I've shown you how to use this technique to build any what we call piecewise linear payoff diagram. But we also know that diagrams can have jumps in them. And right now we don't know how to match a jump, right? I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And I'm going to show you how we match a jump. And that's the second ingredient that I told you about that's a derivative, the cash or nothing binary call. So just give me 1 second. And I'm going to show you our new ingredient that we add to the brew in order to help us match jumps. And that is the thing you can see on the slide right now. And it's about replicating a jump. Can people see this thing on the slide? What is a cash or nothing binary call? I will refer to it as a CNBC, not a reference to the website. A cash or nothing binary call is similar to a call option, but slightly different. It's a different contract. The contract says the buyer of the CNBC will receive $1 if the underlying asset is worth at least K dollars at maturity. If it is worth less than K dollars at maturity, they get nothing. Does everyone agree that the payoff diagram that I have on my slide is exactly the payoff diagram for the security I just described in words? Yes or no? Right? If the thing is worth less than the strike price K, you get nothing. The moment it is worth greater or equal to K, you get $1. But it doesn't matter if it's worth a penny more or $1 trillion more, you're still just getting $1. Does that make sense? Does everyone see how this can replicate a jump? Now let's make our new version of the Racine Carre derivative. So I'm going to now, I'm on such a roll right now in terms of creativity in financial engineering that I have decided not just to create one brand new security today, the Racine Carre derivative, but I'm kind of going bonkers right now, and I'm going to go and create what I will now call the dope Racine Carre derivative. It's dope because it offers you a little bonus, okay? So let's go and change this. Ba-ba-boom. A little something extra, although you're going to have to pay for it, and we're going to see it in our formula. It's dope because it doesn't just flatten at a slope of 0 forever afterwards. At 30, at a payoff, at an underlying asset price of 30, it gives you a dope little bonus. Instead of giving you just 25, it starts giving you 30 forever thereafter. This is what makes it, I'm not sure if dope is a word that people still use. I don't know. Maybe it tells you guys how old I am. This is the dope little bonus, and that's what makes it a dope Racine Carre derivative. Does someone want to tell me, the 4-year-old version of me that's doing Legos, what do I change in my replicating portfolio? I want someone here to tell me instead of me to tell me. Everyone sees that we're going to use the CNBC, right? I think someone's trying to say it. Tell me. Oh, maybe I need to permission that. Give me 1 second.
Oh yeah, you need to long the CNBC call option.
The what? This, yeah, you go to long, right? But notice a CNBC, it's not just one derivative, it's a class of derivatives for all the different possible values of t and k. So the t is the same as the t for everything else here, right? And the k is going to be what?
I can't see. Is it 30?
Yeah, 30, exactly, right? So now, we now add at 30, we go long. How many do we go long? How many of these CNBCs do we need to add and why? It jumps from what? 25 to 30. So we need to create a jump of 5. So how many CNBCs do we buy?
5.
5, exactly. So now we have our 6th ingredient. We go long 5 units of CNBC on underline with K equals to 30 and maturity equals to T. And that is the dope little bonus. In other words, I'm just going to say it in words rather than writing it on the board. What is our formula for the price of the dope Racine Carre derivative? It's equal to the present value of $10 for sure, discounted at the riskless rate for T periods, plus 1 times the price of the underlying right now, minus 4 times the call option on the underlying with a strike price 5 and a maturity T, plus 8 times the price of the call option on the underlying with a strike price 10 and a maturity T, minus 5 times the call option, the price of the call option on the underlying with a strike price 15 and a maturity T. That was the same formula we had before, but plus that dope bonus of 5 times the price of the CNBC on this same underlying with strike price 30 and maturity T. And that's our formula for the dope Racine Carre derivative. And notice that the technique I just described to you, you kind of have the basis to apply it now for any piecewise linear payoff diagram with jumps. You can literally do anything that gets classified in that manner. Does that kind of make sense to people? By the way, almost every project in the world where you don't have a decision on timing, but you have a decision at specific points in time where you decide, do I cut the project? Do I stay with the project at the current scale? Or do I scale up the project? When you can only do that on specific dates, almost every project in the corporate world that is like that has a payoff diagram that is piecewise linear with jumps, so that you are now ready to solve corporate valuation problems in a surprisingly large amount of glory. Well, caveat, once I give you guys formulas for getting the price of all of those call options and those CNBCs. So I will give you the formulas for that. I just won't do it today. But there is a formula. I'm going to give you turns out the Black Scholes model gives you both a formula for the call option. That's what people call the Black Scholes formula. But there's a lesser known formula that gives you the formula for the CNBC as well. So that it's all like It all sings together. And this, like literally the amount of stuff you can do. Once I teach you how to apply this in a corporate world, the amount of stuff you can do with just what I taught you now is actually, it's pretty remarkable actually. Like all my valuation of like really complex securities in venture capital builds just off of this technique. So like a quarter of my VC course just leverages what I taught here, right? And that gets done in the real world. So this is not like that, like this part here is not really just planet, is not just Planet McGill. This gets pretty close to planet Earth. The second technique that I'll cover, which is dynamic replication, that one is a little bit more the domain of Planet McGill. Okay? So actually, you know what? I think I'm even going to change the ordering of how I cover things in this course. I'm going to do the following. I have now covered this technique. What I will do next lecture is I will apply this technique to corporate projects so that you guys immediately see technique, application to corporate valuation. And then we'll do the second technique. So I'm going to weave it instead of doing one and then the other. I think actually that makes sense because I almost feel like after viewing this video or after watching it live, you guys have the momentum where we should just strike while the iron is semi-hot, and just have you guys apply it in a corporate example. Does that sound sensible to you guys? Actually, now that I'm saying this on the fly, I am recognizing it actually makes sense for me to show you guys the formulas for the for the call option and the cash or nothing binary call. So I'll give you guys the formulas, and what I will do is before our next lecture, I'm going to give you guys an Excel template for using both formulas to get prices of stuff that we will be using in our next lecture. Does that sound good? Just might as well close the loop. So I'm skipping forward in my slides because this is not the way I anticipated doing it, but I'm now realizing that's the smarter way to do it. By the way, everything that I did in the algorithm here, I describe in words on my slide. So if you look at slide 10 and 11, if you look at slides 10 and 11, that gives you the algorithm that we just described here. Folks okay with that? So you can read that algorithm to see if that makes sense. People who think algorithmically should be actually able to follow that pretty well. People who are averse to math will look at those two slides and not have this Zen feeling of happiness. If that's how you react, maybe don't focus on those two slides so much and just focus on understanding the example I did here and thinking about how you would do it more generally without thinking of math labels. Are we okay with this? So final thing I want to do is I just want to show you this. Is the good news, remember, as I said, like, it's all fabulous to, oh, I'm sorry, I realized I wasn't sharing my slides a second ago. So I will show you those two slides I was referring to in words in a moment. But before I do that, I just want to highlight, you know, this technique is all fine and good until you need to get a price. And in order to get a price, you need to know how to get the price of this call option. The price of this call option, this call option, this call option, and this CNBC. If you don't know how to get, look, if I ask you, hey, what's the price of a fruit salad where the fruit salad consists of 12 goji berries, 5 acai berries, 1 dragon fruit, and 1 nectar from the heavens, right? And I'm telling you, tell me the price of this. And you're like, oh man, you know, you go to like, you know, you go on the internet, you figure out like the price of a goji berry, an acai thingy, a dragon fruit thingy, and then you type in, I don't remember what I call it, like nectar from the heavens, and like nothing returns. So you don't know the price of like nectar from the heavens. Well, this is a big problem, right? Because you can figure out everything for nectar from the heavens. Then you bring me the salad with no nectar from the heaven. I'm like, I wanted nectar from the heaven. You're not able to solve the problem because you're missing the price of an ingredient, right? So you need to be able to get the price of every ingredient. So the good news is we have a model in finance that gives you a reasonable estimate of the price of each ingredient. It's not perfect, but it's reasonable. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to my slides now and both show you my slides on the algorithm that describes what we did here, but in addition to that, shows you the formulas for getting the price of every ingredient that I put in green here, generically. Every ingredient that you would need in this algorithm, I've got a formula for. It's just that that formula makes assumptions, so it's not perfect. It's not a perfect description of the real world, but it's a good enough description that people in the real world use it. Okay? So let me go ahead and go back to sharing. Everyone can see my slides again now? So as I said, this slide 10 describes my replication algorithm that I showed one example of, well, two examples. I showed it for the Racine Carre derivative and the dope Racine Carre derivative, right? Neither of which, by the way, exists. So if you go and Google that, you'll probably get nothing. I guess the problem is there is the word dope. So if you do search and it matches, it may not be what I want you to find. So just don't check. I don't know. And then the valuation algorithm. Again, I did both of these things via concrete example with Racine Carre and dope Racine Carre derivative. But this slide 10 and 11 kind of express it in the nerdiest, most general way. Folks okay with that? Again, it's to highlight the fact that everything I taught you today can be applied to value any example of a derivative that is piecewise linear with jumps. Anything that is that, you can use this technique. Now we get to how do you get the value or the price of, what did I call it? Nectar from the heavens, right? Because you might not be able to find nectar from the heavens in your local IGA. And this is where the Black Scholes model, this is a model that gives you a formula for the price of any call option under a certain set of mathematical assumptions. The researchers that derived this formula won a Nobel Prize. It's called Black Scholes. Some people call it the Black Scholes Merton model because it was developed by three academics, actually. Two academics and then a third in a slightly different way, but arguably more fundamental. Myron Scholes and Robert Merton won the Nobel Prize for deriving these techniques. Fisher Black would have won it. Unfortunately, he passed away before the award was given. And for some odd reason, Nobel Prizes are never given to people who are deceased. It's kind of, whatever, not the point of ACF, but a bit of a pity because he should have won it. But what I have on the slide here is just the formula for how you get the price of a call option like this on the basis of 5 parameters that we are able to either observe directly or estimate using data. The first parameter is the price of the underlying asset, S0. The second one is the volatility of that asset, sigma. We can estimate it using the historical returns of that asset. T, the maturity date of the option, that you know it. You know what option you're trying to price. And when you know the option, you know the maturity date. It's written in the contract. Strike price, also written in the contract. And then the fifth parameter is the riskless rate. This formula here is actually for an underlying asset that pays no dividends. There's a more general version of this formula that assumes that the stock pays dividends, and you adjust the formula a little bit. But for the purposes of our discussion, we're just going to discuss it under the case of no dividends, okay? So far, so good? Look, most people look at this formula, and they're like, I do not know what in the world is happening here. And one of the main reasons for that is that there's this thing called n of d1. N is a function. The function is the cumulative normal distribution for a normal 0, 1 variable. That means mean 0, standard deviation 1. And that doesn't have a simple expression. For the purposes of our class, you don't even need to sweat the details here, because I am going to give you guys an Excel spreadsheet where you just enter the numbers and the spreadsheet outputs this answer. Okay? So for this class, my goal is not to teach you this formula. I give you a tool that does it for you. And you are allowed to use it for the homework. You are allowed to use it for the exam. If you are interested in being really, really comfortable with the Black Scholes model, my recommendation is to take the derivatives course taught here. Especially, I would recommend taking it with my colleague, Patrick Augustine. He actually teaches this class really nicely, in my opinion. But all you need to know is to get these green prices, to get the price for nectar from the heavens in our course, you've got a simple formula that I give you an Excel template for. Are we okay with that? Here's the other thing. There's a formula for the call option. In the Black Scholes model, there is also a formula for the CNBC under the exact same assumptions, so that when you use this formula for call options and you use that formula for CNBCs, you're being 100% logically consistent. And again, I don't want to over discuss this formula here. That's not the point of my class. I don't want it to be a math class. I give you in my template also the value of the CNBC. So my template, you've got 5 numbers that you plug in, right? Price right now of the underlying, riskless rate, strike maturity date, strike price, and volatility. You plug those 4 numbers in. My spreadsheet gives you both the price of the call option with a strike price K and maturity date T, and the CNBC with a strike price K and maturity T. And that's it. And that gives you the price of every Lego piece you will ever need in order to do the replication and valuation of the replicating portfolio for any piecewise linear function with jumps and drops. Period, full stop. We are now ready to do this in a corporate context. So here's what I'm going to do in our next lecture. I will actually start off the lecture where I actually do a quantitative example of this technique with a financial derivative, but where I actually use the template so that you guys see the whole workflow on a question like this. I will start by doing that. And then after I do that, I will then start doing it in a corporate context where I will also do the full 100% workflow. Folks okay with this? That's what we're going to do next week, all right? So I hope this was interesting and you feel like this could potentially be useful. But also, just as importantly, I hope you guys feel a little bit like this is not as complicated as one may have thought it would be ahead of time. That at the end of the day, every step of the way, we did things in a very basic, and I would say almost childlike manner, where all we're doing is we're taking a complex problem and we're breaking it down into simple pieces and building it back up together, and then using the fact, this is a little bit mysterious for you guys, but we're using the fact that the Black Scholes model gives you a really rich catalog of prices, because the Black Scholes model gives you formulas to price any call option and any CNBC. So you can really think of the Black Scholes model as being like this really like detailed catalog. And so we just use the Black Scholes model as our catalog, and we use the Lego-like thinking to break down our problem into simple pieces. And all we do is we combine those two things together to do this exercise, so that the final thing that we have left, once we understand those basic things, the final thing we have left is to get comfortable breaking down a corporate project and its flexibility, to think about it, you know, like a child playing with Legos and someone who likes to look at a catalog. I actually liked looking at catalogs when I was a kid. I literally learned to read by learning how to read a catalog. I don't know why I was so obsessed with like Sears catalog as a child. Sears, maybe you guys don't even know what Sears is. They kind of, they're either dead or dying. But I used to like read the catalog. That's how I learned to read. So I was always into catalogs and into Legos. So this was always pretty natural to me. But I think it can be natural to everyone. So that's what we're going to do next week. I hope you guys have a good remainder of the week and get a chance to relax and recuperate a little bit during the weekend. I will see you guys next Tuesday. Sound good? Have a good one, everybody. And if anyone has questions, I'll stick around for a bit to try to address anything you guys have. So anyway, I hope this was interesting, helpful, and maybe even if any of you guys have studied derivatives before, maybe you guys feel like you understand it a little bit better now. All right. So yeah, anyone who has questions, I'm open for questions.